Howdy Goons! In many Hidden Gems videos, you're shown a bunch of different games, usually narrated by a guy who sounds like he took Dayquil and NyQuil and is trying to see which would win. That or is voiced by an AI made from a script prompt from a guy who has never played it, never will, and is just a machine algorithmically plucking people's opinions from various different websites like mindlessly plucking strings on a guitar, hoping that the listener might be convinced that they're listening to music. Well, I decided to revisit a game I thought I'd consider a hidden gem and give it a playthrough or two, and then tell you my honest, real opinions on it. The general idea of Chaos Legion is you're playing an action hack and slash game like Devil May Cry, but you have summons that accompany you called the Legion, the Chaos Legion, the Legion of Chaos, a chaotic legion of sorts. You'll summon them and they'll fight for you, or you can leave them not summoned and fight with an enhanced moveset. Despite my thoughts being very mixed on this game, I'd still say that it's pretty peak PS2. It's very experimental and clunky, and that's what I love about the PS2. This was a highly experimental phase. No one really knew what they were doing, but they were competent enough to try a whole lot of different stuff. Some paid off, some didn't. Is it a perfect game? Far from it, but I think it's a good example of a game that's very flawed that I still love, even if at times I absolutely despise it and wish harm to the people that made it. Also, I think Capcom should bring it back. If it was made today, it could be so much better. It might actually be playable. Now, let's get started. Story Part 1, The Manual. Like many games of the time, a lot of the story itself isn't in the game. It's in the manual. They expected us to buy this game from a physical storefront, then excitedly read the manual on the car ride home, after which we suffered with a little bit of motion sickness, but then we're fine and we're ready to play. And with reading the manual, we now know how to play and are more immersed in the story that it was trying to tell. This means the game focuses more on the bare minimum to get us into the action as fast as possible. Considering I bought this game used, I never actually read the manual, so there was some exposition and set dressing that I had missed out on. And it does leave you feeling a little bit lost if you go in without reading the manual. Although, the manual still doesn't do the best job of setting up the story because it immediately references characters by name when we haven't even been introduced to them yet. There isn't even a bio on each of the characters in the manual, so the main character of the game, the one we're playing, is called Sieg. He's the spiky-haired edgelord. He's very 90s anime cool guy coded with a bit of Castlevania gothic vibes. Delacroix is the long-haired edgelord and is our bad guy, and Seela is the girl that both had a thing for. Some bad junk went down and the three of them are summoned by the High Priest. This setting is sort of run by the church like Vatican City. The High Priest has kept a great evil, Azrael, sealed, but the evil's power is growing and awakening. The three were successful in stopping the resurrection, but before Azrael could be sealed away again, he takes Seela's soul with him. This whole fight with a great evil sounds super cool. If only they could have showed us that, or, even let us play it. Unfortunately, the show not tell approach doesn't actually work here, as showing us would spoil the ending, which I did not realize until much later. But a few months after this event, the dude in charge of the church is attacked, and a forbidden tome is stolen called the Apocrypha of Izark. People believe the thief to be Delacroix, and so they send out knights to capture and interrogate him. But when they arrive, no one's home. Sieg goes searching for him, and finds him in full sad boy mode and using the power of darkness. Delacroix disappears and tells Sieg to find him. The two edgelords used to be best buddies, and Delacroix even had a bright future and a high position in the church. Now, as a wielder of the darkness, he's going to each of the locations in the Apocrypha. He seems to be looking for a way to free Azrael once again, and plans to sacrifice Sieg to do so. As Sieg, we have to hunt down our former friend, but we're not alone. Thanks to the power of our order, the Knights of the Dark Glyphs, and the Dark Glyphs themselves, we are accompanied by a Legion of Chaos. Once we get into the game itself, we start with our strongest Legion, and we encounter Delacroix. And that's how it's actually pronounced, it's not Delacroix. He styles on us and tells us that Seela's death is Sieg's fault because he was too weak. His plan is likely to get Seela's soul back and destroy the church. I won't go further into the story until a spoiler section in case you decide to play it yourself. But the story is interesting, the setting is cool, it's very much like Castlevania, and everything about the game has this cool gothic vibe. It's a very aesthetically interesting and appealing game. You can see how an edgy little white rodent and teenagers could get sucked into this. Gameplay. The main gameplay is very similar to the Devil May Cry series, since it's made by Capcom. While it's similar, it's a little more watered down than regular DMC. You have two combat modes, one where you have your Legion out, and one where it's just you. When you have your summons out, it's called Force Mode, and without summons, it's called Assault Mode. Get used to the use of jargon because this game has a lot of it and expects you to know what it means. Assault Mode is your standard action hack and slash mode, and is your stronger mode for single target damage. I spent the majority of the game in this mode. You'll spam your 5-hit combo with square. There is no style meter here, so just focus on long combos and killing things quickly. Then as you attack, you build up your soul meter, which lets you summon your legion or use your legion or assist attack. Press triangle and you'll consume a charge of the meter to do your equipped legion's assist attack. With your starting legion, called Guilt, you'll dash into an enemy and Guilt will strike them. Assault mode has faster walk speed and better combos, but is overall the more dangerous mode to be in. This game has a lot of enemies, and sometimes they won't stop spawning unless you defeat the mob spawner, so you'll need to switch to force mode to avoid being overwhelmed. Other than that, you will be bullied. There is not a dodge button and a shield button until you get the right legion. Force mode is activated by pressing L1 and you'll summon your stands. Each legion has its strong suit and its own behaviors. If you press circle, you'll zap an enemy and your legion will focus them. This is called lock-on, but it's not a normal lock-on like you'd expect in something like DMC or Dark Souls. It only works for your legion. Then if you press triangle, it'll send the attack command which forces them to attack. You can still melee in this form, but you walk much slower and do a little less damage, but your legion makes up for the damage lost. Each legion has its specialty too. Where Guilt is most effective against organic enemies, you have Malice, which are bowmen who are specialized in damaging enemies that are machines. Despite each legion having a thing that they're good at, you're restricted to only being able to equip 2 legions at once. This is mostly because of how the control scheme is limited. They couldn't figure out how to fit more options onto the controller. You can switch the legions you'll use by pressing L2, and R2 puts them into defensive mode, which you will never use because they won't attack until you tell them to. You'll never use this mode, but if your legion gets hit, you lose soul, so having a defensive mode can prevent some loss of it. And you do want to prevent some loss of it because if you lose all of your soul in the meter, your legion will go down until you can deal enough damage to repair their crest or use an item to fix it. Does this sound confusing? Good, because it is. You can see what I mean about the jargon problem. Now imagine you're playing the game and the tutorials pop up and they can be closed with any button. So you're closing things as soon as they open because the tutorials are popping up mid-combo. I think the tutorial wasn't play tested. So it's R1 to send them out, triangle to attack command, circle to lock on, R2 for defensive stance, L2 to swap, L1 to summon, D-pad to move, left stick to also move, and right stick for camera. Absolutely every button is used in this game. So that's why we only get to equip 2 Legion despite having many more buttons. My suggestion would be to do away with the defensive mode. Use D-pad to select one of the 4 crests, and L1 to summon. From these complaints you might think that I hate this game, and I really don't. Aesthetically, thematically, and gameplay-wise, I enjoy it quite a bit. But if you thought that was whining, buckle up. Stages are designed in a way that we can see the inspiration for DMC3's stage progression, but this is before the devs had learned from DMC2 because 2 and Chaos Legion were developed at the same time. So where DMC2 is a little more open, Chaos Legion is very formulaic. It boils down from going room to room and being locked in it until you can defeat all the bad guys or monster spawners. Once you do, the door opens and you can continue. It's very literally, walk into a room, defeat bad guys, walk into the next room, defeat bad guys, and continues until you hit a boss. It's not just formulaic, but incredibly railroaded and claustrophobic. These kill rooms lack anything to make them different from each other. It's like playing Dungeons & Dragons with a child as your DM. These rooms are either full of a set amount of enemies or have monster spawners and you defeat the spawners. On top of that, the difficulty can be pretty hard even on normal. The enemies do huge chunks of damage, with some enemies being able to beat you in 2 hits, and there isn't a dodge button until you get a specific legion, which is pretty late into the game considering it's something as important as a dodge. But aside from that, the game isn't actually difficult, just very time consuming. I would honestly just say play it on easy, because the real difficulty of normal is how much a sponge everything is. Mob spawners are a frequent enemy, and enemies will spawn infinitely until they're defeated. Even on easy, they take ages to kill. At times, it feels like trying to chop down a tree with a spoon. Bosses feel less tanky than the spawners. Bosses come in a couple types. They either have a weak spot that you have to find, or you have to hit them enough to make them stagger. They're not too bad, and their moves are telegraphed enough that you can avoid them. Overall, the stage progression is about introducing you to a new legion you got on the previous stage, then using the specific legion's abilities to get through the boss or that stage, so the game feels like it's about 50% tutorial, and then finally lets you do what you want, and it doesn't really ever stop feeling like a tutorial because of the short stages and some bosses practically requiring the correct legion to beat them. Like the plant boss who summons turrets, it turns the fight into a bullet hell. You either dodge or get juggled, unless you use Arrogance, the shield legion who will block hits and absorb the damage they deal. Then when you press the attack command, they'll unleash all that damage onto an enemy. Imagine playing all the way to a boss, then realizing you didn't equip this stage's tutorial legion, so you have to brute force it, do it the slow way, or start over. So yeah, most of the game I used Guilty for my first legion, then whichever legion I most recently unlocked, just to be safe, and usually that worked. Until the last half of the game where I was given more freedom and I just equipped Guilt and Malice. Unfortunately, this makes the early part of the game tedious until you get to the point where you can replay stages and grind out enough to be strong enough to ignore the railroading. As I kept playing though, I found that the game grew on me a bit. Maybe it was Stockholm Syndrome. After unlocking replays, the game was much more enjoyable. Things were dying in half the time because I bulked up from playing previous stages until I got to the end of the game, and then it got a little grindy again. If only replays were available from the beginning though, this game would be a lot more enjoyable. Fixing the gameplay would be pretty easy. I think Chaos Legion still needs enemy health scaled way back, even on easy mode. The enemy damage reduced, but attack frequency increased. A dodge and a block button built in, one where you don't need the right legions for it, and the stages should be redesigned. More open stages and less reliance on mob spawners and room-to-room gameplay. I'm not the biggest fan of puzzles, but 3 hours in I was begging for something different. And lastly, I'd give Sieg an at least 3-hit combo in the air. Hitting the floating machines is an absolute boring waste of time. Jump, hit, jump, hit, jump, hit, ad nauseum. This is definitely one of those games where it gets better on the second playthrough though. Progression mechanics. This is sort of an RPG game where you can increase your stats, you get experience points for your legion, and you spend them on upgrades. The amount of experience they gain is based on whether they perform the last hit or whether Sieg does a counter. The upgrades are Enchant, Assist, Force, Attack, and Defense. Enchant increases the amount of legionnaires summoned, Assist adds combos for Assault mode, Force makes them better while being summoned, Attack increases their damage, and Defense increases their defense. Leveling legions doesn't just level them up and increase their stats, each one works like a piece of equipment for Sieg as well. Increasing Blasphemy's force increases how much soul power Sieg has, but other legions like Guilt can increase your melee damage. You can increase Sieg stats further and more permanently through finding items in stages. When you defeat enemies, they'll drop stat increasing items and experience gems. The stat items are used on the spot and increases Sieg's damage, HP, and defense. Experience gems are consumables used to increase the experience a legion has. This is good for legions that are falling behind or if you want to play favorites and boost one. These items disappear after a while, so make sure you grab them as soon as you see them, because if you miss an attack up, you are going to feel it later. Legions. Alright, you're probably very curious about the legions. They're half the name, and the ones I've shown are super cool. So legions come in 7 kinds, like 7 deadly sins, but in their own different sins. Guilt, hatred, malice, arrogance, flawed, blasphemy, and thanatos, death. Each one has a thing they do and are good at, as well as things that they suck at. Thanatos is the one you start with, but in Metroid style, you get your cheeks clapped and you lose access to them. Guilt is the actual first one that you start with. There are a handful of swordsmen and they do extra damage to organic enemies. Organic enemies are among the most common. They're spiders, dogs, ogre things, and mob spawners. You'll encounter spawners on every stage and they take forever to beat, so you should always bring something like Guilt with you on every stage. Guilts are terrible when it comes to fighting machines though, they do practically no damage, but as you level them, these restrictions matter less and less. Guilts are pretty easy to use. You hit an enemy with lock-on and then mash triangle while you mash square. They attack really fast and can defeat most enemies very quickly, but they're not the most evasive and can get hit easily by ranged enemies or large groups if they're not staggering enemies enough. Leveling Guilt is useful as they give melee damage to Sieg, but only a bonus of 20, so by the time you unlock Hatred you can probably ditch them. I stuck with them through the end of the game now. Malice is the second one we get, and they're crossbow guys who deal bonus damage to machines. Arrow dudes will one-shot the flying machines and can quickly dispatch other machines like cannons and mortars, and later on, big armor knights. If you hold the attack button you can aim with them, and they'll consume souls to blast enemies. You can't move while doing this, and mob spawners are organic, so this does like no damage to them. Many machines are also infinitely respawning, making Malice useless on many stages. Upping Malice can make them really good. You can walk around while just mashing triangle and getting through the game, but honestly the novelty isn't really worth it. It's better to just only pull them out when you need them. The third legion is Blasphemy. If you play Devil May Cry 3, you might notice that they look a little like those bomb guys. That's their deal too. Blasphemy will spawn, then float over to an enemy and explode. You can press triangle to explode them immediately, or you can use triangle in assault mode to kick them like a soccer ball. This would be useful for taking out the flying spawners if the flying spawners weren't so beefy. Plus side is that Blasphemy is strong against all enemy types. Blasphemy is also a huge soul meter eater, so it's good that leveling Force increases how much soul meter they can have. Arrogance is the fourth legion and they're a shield. When summoned they'll appear in front of you. If you want to move them, tap R1 to move them to where you're facing. Then when hit they'll take up a little soul meter, and then you can use triangle, and depending on the damage that they've taken, they'll do different lasers on the enemies, like a counterattack. If you don't make them attack, they won't attack. This might seem useless, but many enemies are designed to be taken out swiftly by Arrogance. A whole boss fight is an absolute pain in the fuzzy butt cheeks without them. Leveling Shield also gives us defense, of course. After stage 5 though, you'll probably never use them again. Flawed is the 5th legion, and they're kind of just there. They serve to give us a double jump. Other than that, they're like Guilt for machine enemies. They also give us an evade. They're very good at defeating machines too. Unupgraded, they're even better than Malice. Overall, not very necessary aside from a couple of items you can't reach without double jump, and unless you really want to dodge that badly. Hatred is the 6th legion. This is just a bigger and beefier version version of guilt. Hate can also destroy walls found later with the hand markings on them, and hatred is super useful as they increase your max health by quite a bit, taking you out of that 2-shot range very easily. The final one is Thanatos, and in order to unlock him, you have to find all of the Thanatos pieces throughout the stages. Unlocking Thanatos actually requires the unlocking of a special mode that you get much later in the game. Overall, before I get into spoiler territory, I'm going to give you a short review based on my thoughts of the game at this point in the game. The video isn't done, but if you want to avoid spoilers, then you should go play it now. I will be talking about spoilers after the review. That said, if you don't care about spoilers, stick around. We even get to play a different character, so maybe that'll be interesting. I think Chaos Legion is a very interesting game with a cool setting and the lore that is criminally underexplored. Combat is perfectly fine for the era, but going back to something like this doesn't age well for modern gamers. The legions are fantastically designed and the monsters are just okay. They work. The general gameplay loop of room to room destroying mob spawners is tedious and boring, but returning to stages to see how much stronger you've got is pretty satisfying. The controls are fine but could have been better, and it lacks many modern conveniences that would have made it more playable, like aerial combos, dodging, and blocking. Those should just be built in. I think more time playtesting was needed too. There is no way anyone but the devs tried this on normal or higher. Overall, I think it's just an okay game, like a 6 out of 10, and it could have been so much better. At times it feels rushed, and even the game feels uninterested in telling you its own story. That said, if any game is deserving of a remake, I think it's Chaos Legion. I really want to see what this game could have been given the proper attention and budget. If it were made today, it really would have been so much better. You're not missing out on it though. If this is a hidden gem, it just should have stayed hidden. I do like it despite all the issues, I just can't imagine the average person would enjoy this. Story Part 2. From here out is the story. If you don't want any spoilers, then just end the video here. Do come back if you do finish the game, or, change your mind later. It'd be good for the algorithm or whatever. Anyway, the story is very straightforward. You chase Delacroix's trail, and Sieg does it all without telling home base about it. He meets a girl whose family died because of Delacroix, so she's following you because she has a hate boner for him. She tries to kill him, and it turns out that he's immune to bullets.
This is for my brother.
Well, a maiden of the silver. I thought it was against your vows to allow your emotions to turn violent.
Quiet!
Useless.
Then Sieg finds out that Delacroix is after 3 magical MacGuffins, and so we race to each of the MacGuffins. The story is incredibly bare bones and laughably bad. At one point, Arcee is like, "Sieg, you must tell me everything you know!" And then we're jumped by monsters, and Sieg is like, "Not now, we have guests."
Glyphs will release the spirit of purification, allowing the 3 worlds to reunite once again. I believe it's from a part of the Elder's story, but isn't it just a folklore, a fairy tale for children?
No, it really does exist. The imprisoned spirit does.
Zeke, tell me everything you know. What's he planning to do?
Like, even the game is begging for more story and shooting down the opportunity as it arises.
That's the only way.
Why does he want to unbind the spirit?
You don't need to know that. It's between me and him.
Later we encounter Delacroix at the second glyph, and being that we've been tailing him, he was of course way ahead of us. I hate saying his name, by the way. It throws off the flow of my sentence every time. It's just like I gotta put all my essence into making sure I pronounce Delacroix correctly. So we get into the glyph chamber. Arcea starts yapping, and as you'd expect, Sieg starts viewing her as if she was Seela. Seela asks why we killed her and shows us scenes of her being stabbed by us. Odd, the manual didn't say anything about that. Did we really kill her, or is Delacroix tricking us? We awake later in a shack, and just as Arcea is about to get more info out of Sieg, again, she gives up and leaves. Again, the story is not interested in telling us the story.
What makes you fight so hard? I don't know what's happened between you and Delacroix. But you seem to be in a rush to die.
If I could only atone for the sin that I've committed.
Your sin?
I wasn't able to save even a single woman.
A single woman.
but all I can do is keep fighting.
Sorry, I shouldn't have asked about it. I think you need more rest. I really don't know anything about Zeke. Nothing at all.
From here, play resumes as Arcia. Playing Arcia. Arcia is a Maiden of the Silver, which means she's packing heat. She fights with double blickies. Her controls are similar to Sieg's, except L1 changes between ranged and melee mode. In either mode, press circle to do special moves which consume bullets. To get bullets back, you need to find magazines or bullet items. Then, just like Sieg, she has stats of her own. We can't raise her stats in the story, but you can unlock her for a playthrough of her own later, should you finish the higher difficulties. She's a little easier to play than Sieg, just because she has less buttons. Also, her attacks are much faster, and the gun's max range is super far. You can switch to gun mode and sit back and defeat enemies and mob spawners from far away, and since she shoots so fast, you can defeat them much faster. Honestly, it feels like the game is much more balanced around her than it is Sieg. All you do is sit back and blast away or run in and use your special shots on required enemies. Since she starts with a double jump, it's very easy to avoid enemies and jump straight to the required kills. The best part is that she has the best aimbot in the West. God, I love a woman who can murder me without even trying. If they're too far for aimbot though, you can always switch to gun mode, then hold square and it turns into snipe mode. Is she fun to play? No, not really. Was it a nice break from Sieg? Absolutely. I definitely couldn't play a whole game through like this though. She's very button mashy and bosses are trivialized by her. With the boss defeated, we have the map selector which will let us get back up and farm up old stages. I farmed up a bit before continuing the story, so if you were wondering whether the game got easier on replays, yes, much easier. Stages I struggled with became stages where I hold forward and mash the attack command. Farming was easier too since some key items were replaced with large experience gems. Story, Part 3. The story picks up with Sieg in the city of Izark. It has the same name as the Apocrypha, and it's a forbidden city. Can't be that forbidden because we walk right in. Up until this point, I haven't talked too much about the monsters because they're really not anything special, aside from the bosses and the fat shield dudes with the jiggle physics on their bellies, and the invisible enemies who take more damage from Legion, but also deal more damage to Legion. They've just been a bunch of fodder between me and the spawners. Now we're introduced to leader monsters. These guys command an army of swordsmen like Sieg does. They're able to coordinate attacks, but the most annoying part is that they get a block. I have to equip the right Legion and do long animations to get the guard to work. I hate this place. The rest of the stage is just more of the same. Ignore everything, hit the spawner, repeat, even the boss fight is a repeat. It's a return of the floating guy. You just hit him until his armor breaks, then jump attack his eyes for max damage. I did about 3 hours of farming and repeating stages before this, so I'm pretty strong now. I can even beat bosses and machines without needing the right Legion. Stage 11 gives us no upfront story because it decides to backload it all. After hours of grinding, we get a boss fight with Delacroix. We've been jerked around by this guy and every little beastie in this game, but we finally get to slap his anime cosplay wig wearing ass around a bit. I won't lie though, he's a little tough. Sorry, not tough. Tedious, annoying, a pain, a time waster, exhausting. He floats around the whole time, and you're intended to fight him in the center, wait for him to make himself vulnerable between summons. I don't really have the time for that. I have things that I want to do, like other games I want to play. So I chase him down and hit him when I can, and yeah, I do a lot of damage, but the constant backpedaling, like dude is playing a different game from me. I'm playing an action RPG, and he's playing Call of Duty Zombies the way he's walking backwards. After lots of summons and heals, I do beat him first try. Then we get into the big info dump. Delacroix wants to free the 3 realms from the cycle. People on this world live and die and their souls get sent to heaven or hell where they rest or suffer, then enter the cycle as a new life. Those who summon Legion like Sieg disrupt the cycle by summoning Legions. Apparently every time I've summoned a Legion, it destroyed a lost wandering soul. So we're also the bad guy. Finally, a game that lets me be evil while pretending to be the good guy. But this game is just my life, but with gothic architecture and bad haircuts. I take a lot of pride in my hair care. Sieg just wakes up and gels it in whatever bedhead he woke up with. Sieg says that he's BSing, that he doesn't know anything, and that Sela would never want this, and he's just being an edgy turd because he's tainted by the evil. But Delacroix says by ending the cycle, all souls can live on eternally, and that's his plan to get back with Sela, and he says he promised her this. Dude is the king of the simps. I really don't know who knows Sela better, as both are constantly revealing info to us as we go. The game hardly mentions Sela, and if you didn't read the manual, you wouldn't know much more than she died. After Delacroix appears again, Arcia and Sieg part ways. Arcia feels saddened and useless in the battle against Delacroix. She realizes it's more important for her to help Delacroix's victims than to go to war with what is essentially a god walking on the earth. Or floating, I guess. So Delacroix's grand plan is to kill everyone because total annihilation is a total unification of the souls. He thinks he's freeing everyone by freeing them from their bodies. Sieg returns to Rotarl, the capital, to catch Delacroix. This translates to a stage with no story and a near total recycling of the second stage. It's the second stage, but it's dark and spooky, and yeah, I'm starting to think that this Delacroix guy might not be a good guy. It ends with a boss that I fought earlier, but he has a shield, so you whoop on him until he staggers, but he has a shield to block you. So you bait out the shield by standing on one of the edges of the arena. Super easy boss. Another world. Afterwards, this unlocks the Another World, which is a Side B version of the stages. For those under the age of 30, Side B refers to the flipped over side of a cassette, or a record. In retro games, this just means the same stage, but altered in some way. In Chaos Legion, they have different enemies. This gives me something slightly different to do if I decide to go back and farm up for a bit. Unfortunately, once Side B is unlocked, we can't go back to the A-side versions, but there is a reason to go back and do these because the remaining Thanatos chips are on Side B stages 8 and 11, so womp womp. Technically optional, but not really. This game really likes to reuse stages, and I'm totally cool with that as long as they're giving me something new or more to do. Like in Dynasty Warriors, you will never hear me complaining about revisiting locations. Story Part 4. All the way up to the final stage, stage 14, we get no other story. There has been multiple stopping points where we were expected to farm. I got my life, attack, and defense nearly maxed, and enemies are still sponges. The story for 14 goes so hard though, and up until this point I thought the edge was just an aesthetic. But no, Sieg meets up with Delacroix and says what we've all been thinking. Not that Sieg dresses like he tripped in a spirit Halloween, but that Delacroix's plan has been to release Azrael to free Seele, and Sieg is the final sacrifice needed to free her because it's his fault or whatever. I've been paying attention, but the story was predictable from the beginning. Should have given us a twist or something, like Delacroix fell for a trap by Azrael, and now he's possessed, but the devs are very green. They love recycling assets, so there's no way they'd make a whole new dude. Or so I thought. Anyway, Arcia comes in and says Delacroix is a pathetic little simp, and like the incel Delacroix is, he tries to get Arcia to blow her brains out all over the new carpet. I'm not joking, the edge wasn't just for show. Arcia has her arm possessed by Delacroix, and she gets it blown off, smooth off. She got the deluxe haircut. She's gone, she's expired, she's no more, dead as hell. At least I don't have to play another Arcia stage. Fighting Delacroix for the second time is much like the first time. The stage is just smaller. We'll sit still waiting for moments when Delaware is vulnerable. I should just call him that, that's so much easier to say. Usually this is when he starts casting or doing a combo. If you've been leveling Malice from the beginning, he doesn't bother dodging in this fight, so feel free to spam triangle. After that, we're met with a cutscene that finally tells the truth of the events that happened during the sealing of Azrael. Perhaps I should have given them some credit, because there is a little bit of a twist that I should have caught on to a little bit sooner. It was kind of obvious. As the fight ends, Arcia stands up. The silver bullet must not have worked because she's not a werewolf. The bullet grazed her as she was able to regain some control just before the trigger was pulled. Doesn't explain why she passed out or whatever, but she insists that there's a little bit of Delacroix left in there. Delacroix goes to stab Sieg, and Arcia steps between them, and this triggers a flashback within Delacroix's memory. So Delacroix, Sieg, and Seele were tasked to seal Azrael, and it was starting to work. When Delacroix struggles and is possessed by Azrael, Azrael forces Delacroix to turn against his friend Sieg, and before he can kill Sieg, Seele jumps in front of him, taking the hit. Sieg catches her just before Delacroix sees the scene, thinking it was Sieg who was possessed by Azrael the whole time. When he said Sieg was too weak to save her, he meant Sieg was too weak to fend off Azrael's possession. Back to the future, present, whatever, Delacroix realizes it was him who was too weak actually, so he kills himself as the final sacrifice to Azrael. Even in this moment of clarity, he thinks he's in the right, destroying the borders between heaven, hell, and earth. And I think we've all been there. You hook a baddie, you lose her to an ancient god, and you swear to destroy heaven and hell to be reunited with her. Young love. So pure and innocent. Those were the days. Simpler times. Delacroix goes bungee jumping without a cord and awakens Azrael. I really didn't give them enough credit. We had a twist, even if it was predictable, and even the main character, Delacroix, plays Jumper by Third Eye Blind. I was not expecting that. But Azrael's form, as it appears, is grotesque, twisted, and it looks like the hordes in the Legion that we've been fighting with and against up until this point. If you've ever seen a final boss in a Final Fantasy game, it's kind of like that, and that's just the life of an intergalactic villain like me, though. We fight other villains and gods just as much as heroes do. I just don't brag about it. You'll never get to hear about the time I killed a god with a rubber band, shoes, and a squirt gun. Nope, poor little Nimzy will never get to hear our bards sing of their daring do. But yeah, another day, another Japanese game, another god getting slain. And this one, while pretty rad, isn't much crazier than any other JRPG god. I really thought we'd be fighting yet another Delacroix. Seems like the game really is good at doing that one kind of boss fight. But the boss fight is straightforward. He barely moves, in fact. He floats up and down just slightly outside of your jumping strike range. Like Delacroix, we spend most of our time avoiding their range move. I say there because the god hasn't given me their pronouns yet, and this is an inclusive channel. I'm a bad guy, but I'm not a bad guy. The god of indeterminate gender will bombard you with lasers, rockets, and summon the legions of the dead, like most agender people are capable of. You just wait for your opportunity, then jump in and get some hits. I'm stupid and rich in healing items, so I just stand in front of them and swing until they float into my hits. Don't waste too many heals though. It wouldn't be a final boss in a Japanese game if it didn't have multiple phases. The big bad sheds its legion looking form and takes on an evil version of Seela, which I mean, do you have to ask? Would. But she definitely turned me down. I'm nowhere near 6 foot. At first her fight seems like it might be another Delacroix fight, and it is. Except she's practically impervious to all damage sources until she weakens herself. When she appears on the ground in the middle of the arena to do bullet hell attacks is the only moment she takes full damage. If you level Malice, you can get away with spamming triangles, so yeah, she's Delacroix, but she put points into her defense. She showed up for leg day. Once defeated, we see the final bit of story. A vision of sorts where Seela and Sieg talk in a grassy prairie. Seela tells us she was happy to have met Sieg and Delacroix. Sieg says the same, and as the vision fades away, Delacroix fades in next to Seela. He got to reunite with her after all. But I guess hell must not actually exist like they all believed, because I feel like going against God would get you put there, not in heaven with your loved ones. But the absolute worst part of this game is yet to come. There's a 90s rock song that makes your local garage band sound like Van Halen. They just repeatedly keep saying, fly so high, and the whiniest. It's a very soft and weak ending that doesn't really wrap up anything for us, and there's no after credit scene because this was before Marvel. For me, the big bummer comes from the clear data save at the end. You'd think that this is the start of New Game Plus and that I might be able to start over with the same stuff on a higher difficulty, but no, if you want to play through on normal, you have to start it at normal, and I assume the same will be true if you beat normal and want to play hard, once you unlock it. This was before DMC3 when we could go back and choose stages and difficulties and keep everything. So I guess it's to be expected, but I was hoping to carry everything through to the other difficulties so I could get all of the achievements on retro achievements. But honestly, there are few things worse than playing this game on normal with a fresh save, let alone hard. Just a terribly slow, tedious, and grindy game. I can sincerely say that there was little that I enjoyed in my 11 hours with this game. If this was one of your favorites, I totally get it from an aesthetic and story standpoint, but the game is just terrible, which I don't have rose-tinted glasses for many games from my childhood, but this is one I especially don't have them for. I don't really recommend this game for anyone. It's too clunky and slow, and I guess this is why you beat the game before you review it, because my opinion has changed pretty greatly. Play DMC 2. Even though it's the worst DMC, it's still better than Chaos Legion. But just like this game, I'm going to end this video abrupt. Thanks for watching. I don't usually do longer videos like this in one go, so I hope you enjoyed it. It's not the worst game ever, but you have to be a very special gamer for this one. I can't suffer through the jank personally. I had to even take breaks while making this script. I did not have the patience for it. Anyway, extra special thanks to the members who helped me make videos like this. People like Dragon Fanatic, Willie Pete, Linky, and AstroPixie YT make the suffering worth it. I'll see you all later. I'm gonna go sprout